that's your engagement ring? My sister Victoria's voice carried across my parents' Thanksgiving table, loud enough that all 17 family members stopped mid-conversation. It looks like something from a quarter machine at the grocery store. I glanced down at the simple silver band on my finger, the pale green stone catching the candlelight in a way that made it seem almost alive. You're probably right, I said, reaching for the mashed potatoes. What I didn't tell her was that the cheap ring she was mocking was a 12.8-carat Alexandrite that had belonged to Grand Duchess Maria Pavlovna of Russia, worth approximately $12 million, and currently listed as missing from the Romanov collection since 1918. Seriously, Margot, Victoria continued, emboldened by my lack of defense. She held up her own hand, where a 3-carat diamond caught the light with all the subtlety of a disco ball. When Blake proposed, he spent 3 months' salary. That's how you know a man is serious. What did your fiancé spend? $50? My fiancé, James, tensed beside me. Under the table, I squeezed his hand. He knew the truth. He'd been with me when my grandmother passed away 2 years ago, when she'd pressed this ring into my palm and whispered its story. Never tell them what you have, darling. Let them show you who they are first. It's got sentimental value, I said quietly. Sentimental, Victoria laughed, and her husband Trevor joined in. That's what people say when they can't afford anything real. Mom, doesn't it embarrass you? Your daughter getting proposed to with a ring that probably turned her finger green. My mother, Patricia, dabbed at her mouth with her napkin. She looked uncomfortable, but not uncomfortable enough to defend me. Well, it's the thought that counts, Victoria. Though, Margot, dear, if you wanted to upgrade later, I'm good with what I have, I said. My cousin Ashley leaned forward, squinting at my hand. Is that even a real stone? It looks weird. Like, is it supposed to be green or purple? It's like it can't make up its mind. That's because it's probably plastic, Victoria said. She'd had 4 glasses of wine, and her voice had taken on that particular edge it got when she felt powerful. I mean, look at it. It changes color depending on the light. Real gemstones don't do that. Actually, Alexandrite was famous for exactly that, its pleochroic properties making it appear green in daylight and raspberry red under incandescent light. It was one of the rarest gemstones on Earth, rarer than diamonds, rarer than rubies. This particular stone had been mined in the Ural Mountains in 1895, set by Faberge himself, and worn by Russian royalty until the revolution scattered the imperial jewels across the world. My grandmother had been a curator at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. She'd spent 40 years tracking lost imperial treasures. This ring had found its way to her through channels she'd never fully explained. And she'd worn it on a simple band, hiding in plain sight, for 30 years. You know what? Victoria stood up, reaching across the table. Let me see it. I want to get a closer look at this sentimental ring. Victoria, sit down, my father said half-heartedly. No, I'm serious. Margot's always been secretive about everything. Remember when she wouldn't tell us where she worked? Or where she lived? She probably got this ring at a pawn shop and is too embarrassed to admit it. The table had gone quiet in that particular way that meant everyone was deeply interested but pretending not to be. My Aunt Susan was holding her fork in midair. Uncle Richard had stopped chewing. I slowly twisted the ring off my finger. It moved easily, the silver band worn smooth from my grandmother's decades of wear. I held it up in the candlelight, watching it shift from forest green to deep purple red. Here, I said, handing it to Victoria. Look all you want. She snatched it from my hand, holding it up to the light. Trevor pulled out his phone, turning on the flashlight. Huh, he said. That is weird. It really does change color. Still looks fake, Victoria said, but her voice had lost some of its certainty. She turned the ring over, examining the inside of the band. What's this? There's some kind of marking. It's probably the manufacturer's stamp, Trevor said. Even cheap rings have those. The marking was actually a Faberge hallmark, but I wasn't about to explain that. Can I have it back? I asked. In a minute. Victoria was still examining it, her expression shifting from smug to confused to something else. This feels heavy. Like, heavier than it should be. That's because the stone is real, James said quietly. It was the first time he'd spoken all dinner. Victoria laughed. Sure it is. Let me guess, it's some rare precious stone that just happens to look like cheap costume jewelry. Actually, yes, James said. My mother set down her wine glass. James, you don't have to defend. Alexandrite, James continued. Named after Tsar Alexander II. First discovered in the Ural Mountains in 1834. Extremely rare. The color change property is caused by the presence of chromium. In daylight or fluorescent light, it appears green. Under incandescent light, it looks red. The table was completely silent now. Trevor's phone was still in his hand. I watched him type something, his thumb moving fast. His face changed. Holy shit. What? Victoria asked. Alexandrite. Real Alexandrite can go for, it says here, up to $70,000 per carat for high-quality stones. Let me see that ring again, my father said, standing up. Victoria's hands had closed around it protectively. It's not, this can't be real. Margot works at a nonprofit. She drives a 10-year-old Honda. She lives in a one-bedroom apartment in Brookline. She doesn't have jewelry worth $70,000 per carat, Trevor said slowly, still reading from his phone. He looked up at me. How many carats is that stone? 12.8, I said quietly. The math hung in the air. Even Ashley could calculate it. 12.8 times 70,000 was almost $900,000, my Uncle Richard said, his voice barely a whisper. You're wearing a ring worth almost $1 million. That's if it's real, Victoria said quickly. Which it's not. It can't be. You'd have to be insane to wear something that valuable just walking around. You'd keep it in a safe, get it insured, you wouldn't just, unless you inherited it from someone who wore it the same way, James said. Someone who believed in hiding valuable things in plain sight. My mother had gone very pale. Your grandmother's ring. Margot, is that the ring she left you? I nodded. But she told me it was just a keepsake. Something with sentimental value. She said. She said what you needed to hear, I finished. Grandma understood that some people couldn't handle knowing the truth. Victoria was still holding the ring, but her hands were shaking now. This is insane. If this is real, if it's actually worth that much, why the hell would you wear it? Why wouldn't you sell it? Because it was my grandmother's, I said simply. And because some things matter more than money. That's easy to say when you're sitting on $1 million ring, Ashley muttered. Trevor was still scrolling on his phone. Wait. It says here that large alexandrites, like over 10 carats, are even rarer than diamonds of the same size. They're so rare that most jewelry experts will never see one in their entire career. If this is real, if it's actually that size, it could be worth. He stopped, his eyes widening. It could be worth a lot more than $70,000 per carat. How much more? My father asked. It doesn't really say. Prices for stones that rare are usually determined by private auction. But there's an article here about a 21-carat alexandrite that sold for $1.5 million in 2014. More silence. So if this is real, Victoria said slowly, and it's 12.8 carats. Margot, my mother's voice was sharp now. Where exactly did your grandmother get this ring? This was the moment. I could keep lying by omission, keep letting them believe whatever they wanted. Or I could tell them the truth and watch their world shift on its axis. She acquired it through her work at the museum, I said carefully. She spent her career tracking lost Imperial Russian treasures. This particular piece was part of the Romanov collection, worn by Grand Duchess Maria Pavlovna. It went missing after the revolution in 1918. Grandma found it in an estate sale in Paris in 1987. She wore it for 30 years, and no one ever knew what it was. The Romanov collection, my Aunt Susan repeated faintly. As in, Russian royalty? There's no way, Victoria said, but her voice had lost all its confidence. If this was really from the Russian imperial family, it would be in a museum, it would be, she left detailed provenance documentation, I said. Authentication certificates, historical records, the full chain of custody. It's all stored in a safety deposit box at Fidelity. James and I were planning to have it reappraised this week for insurance purposes. Trevor's face had changed. He was looking at the ring in Victoria's hands with a new intensity. Insurance purposes. Right. You'd need serious insurance for something like this. Our jeweler recommended Christie's auction house for the appraisal, James added. They specialize in Imperial Russian pieces. And there it was. The piece I'd been waiting for. Victoria's face went from red to white. Christie's? You mean, you've already contacted them? They're doing the appraisal on Friday, I said. Trevor had set down his phone. He was staring at Victoria with an expression I couldn't quite read. She was staring at the ring in her hands like it had suddenly become radioactive. Well, she said, her voice bright and brittle, I guess you should keep this very safe. Wouldn't want anything to happen to it. She held it out to me. I took it back, sliding it onto my finger where it belonged. In the candlelight, it glowed purple-red, like a secret finally revealed. The rest of Thanksgiving dinner was awkward in a way that made the earlier tension seem comfortable by comparison. Victoria barely spoke. Trevor excused himself 3 times to take phone calls. My parents kept looking at me like they'd never seen me before. As James and I were leaving, my mother pulled me aside in the hallway. Why didn't you tell us? Tell you what? That I had an expensive ring? You never asked. You assumed it was cheap, and I let you believe it. That's not fair. Isn't it? Victoria's been mocking everything about my life for years. My job, my apartment, my car, my clothes. Tonight was just the ring. If I'd told you what it was worth, would that have changed anything? Or would you all have just found something else to judge me for? My mother didn't have an answer for that. James and I drove home in silence for a while. Then he said, "You know Victoria's going to tell everyone, right? By tomorrow, your entire extended family will know you're wearing $1 million ring." "Probably more than that," I said quietly. "The appraisal isn't until Friday, but the jeweler we consulted gave a preliminary estimate of 10 to 12 million. Imperial pieces with full provenance documentation are almost priceless." James nearly swerved off the road. "I'm sorry, what? 12 million. Give or take." "Margot, you told me it was valuable. You didn't tell me it was worth more than our entire apartment building. Would it have changed anything?" He thought about that. "No," he said finally. "But Jesus. $12 million on your finger. No wonder your grandmother told you to keep quiet." My phone rang at 8 a.m. the next morning. It was a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was local. I answered. "Ms. Margot Hensley?" A woman's voice, professional and crisp. "Speaking. This is Caroline Wright from Christie's auction house. I'm calling about an Alexandrite ring that was brought to our attention. We believe it may be part of the Romanov Imperial collection. A man called us yesterday claiming to have access to this piece and offering to facilitate a sale. He said his name was Trevor Ashford and that the ring belonged to his wife's sister." "Would that be you?" My stomach dropped. "Yes. That would be me." "I see. Mr. Ashford sent us photographs of the ring and some preliminary information. Ms. Hensley, if this piece is authentic, we're looking at one of the most significant Imperial Russian artifacts to surface in decades. The Grand Duchess Maria Pavlovna's Alexandrite has been missing for over a century. Its estimated value would be substantial." "How substantial?" "Based on the photographs alone, our Imperial Russian specialist believes we're looking at $12 to $15 million at auction, possibly more if there's a bidding war between private collectors and museums." "But Miss Hensley, there's a problem." "What kind of problem?" "Mr. Ashford claimed he had the authority to sell this piece on your behalf. He provided what appeared to be power of attorney documentation. However, our legal team flagged several irregularities. Before we proceed any further, we need to verify ownership directly with you. Do you currently possess this ring?" I looked down at my hand, where the ring sat exactly where it belonged. "Yes." "And did you authorize anyone to sell it on your behalf?" "Absolutely not." There was a pause. "I see. Ms. Hensley, I need to inform you that Mr. Ashford's actions may constitute attempted fraud. He asked us to send authentication and appraisal documentation to his address and discussed consignment terms. If he was acting without your knowledge or consent, we'll need to report this to the appropriate authorities." "Do what you need to do," I said. After I hung up, I called James. Then I called my lawyer. Then, because I'm not entirely without mercy, I called my sister. Victoria answered on the first ring. "Margot, thank God. Listen, about Trevor, he didn't mean anything by it, he was just trying to help, he thought." "Christie's called me," I said quietly. Silence. "Victoria, why would your husband try to sell my ring?" "He wasn't trying to sell it," she said quickly. "He was just getting information. He wanted to help you understand what you had, get it properly valued. He thought you might not know the right channels. He sent them power of attorney documents." More silence. "Forged documents, Victoria. He forged my signature and tried to claim the right to sell a $12 million artifact that doesn't belong to him. That's fraud. That's a felony." "12 million?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "The website said maybe 1 million, we thought. You thought you'd try to sell my inheritance without my knowledge and pocket the money?" "No. We have debts, Margot. Trevor's company laid him off in August. We're 3 months behind on the mortgage. When we saw that ring, when we realized what it might be worth, we thought maybe you'd want to sell it anyway, and we could help facilitate that, and maybe there'd be a finder's fee, or you could forge documents and cut me out entirely." She was crying now. "We're going to lose the house. We're going to lose everything. I didn't know it was worth that much, I swear. Trevor said maybe we could get a small percentage for helping, just enough to catch up on payments, Victoria." I kept my voice level. "Christie's is reporting this to the police. Trevor committed fraud. The documentation alone proves intent. If you were involved in any way, you could be charged too." "I wasn't. I swear, I didn't know he was going to do that. He took photos at dinner, he said he was just looking it up. I didn't know he was going to call auction houses. I didn't know he was going to forge anything." "Then you need to get a lawyer. Today. Right now." I hung up. James arrived at my apartment 20 minutes later with coffee and the morning's anxiety written all over his face. "Christie's called you?" "Trevor tried to sell my ring. Sent them forged power of attorney documents and everything." Jesus. James sat down heavily on the couch. Is he that stupid, or that desperate? Probably both. My phone rang again. This time it was my mother. Margot, please. Victoria just called me in hysterics. She says Trevor made a mistake, that he was just trying to help. You're not really going to press charges against your brother-in-law, are you? He's family. He tried to steal $12 million from me, Mom. He made an error in judgment. People make mistakes. You can't destroy a marriage, destroy a man's entire life over a mistake. I didn't destroy anything. Trevor did that himself. If this goes to court, if he gets charged, Victoria will be humiliated. The whole family will be humiliated. Can't you just, I don't know, warn him? Tell him never to do it again? Let it go. Like you let it go when Victoria mocked my ring at dinner? When she called it trash? When she implied my fiancé was too cheap to buy me something real? My mother didn't answer that. Here's what's going to happen, I said. Christie's has already reported the fraud attempt to the police. That's out of my hands. Trevor will be investigated, possibly charged. If he's lucky and cooperates fully, maybe he gets probation. If not, he's looking at jail time. Either way, his attempt to steal from me is documented and reported. I'm not stopping that. Margot, please. But I'm not going to actively pursue additional charges beyond what Christie's has already filed. If Trevor stays away from me and my ring, if he never contacts Christie's again, if he leaves me completely alone, I won't push for the maximum penalties. That's as merciful as I'm willing to be. You've become so cold, my mother said. No, I replied. I've just stopped letting you mistake kindness for weakness. The police called that afternoon. Detective Martinez from the art theft unit, which apparently was a real thing in Boston. Trevor had already been brought in for questioning. The forged power of attorney documents had been easy to disprove. Christie's had provided their full correspondence. It was, the detective said, one of the more straightforward cases he'd seen. Mr. Ashford is claiming he misunderstood the situation, Detective Martinez said. He says he thought you wanted to sell the ring and had given him verbal permission to explore options. Is there any truth to that? None whatsoever. I met him for the first time at Thanksgiving dinner. The only thing I said about the ring was that it had sentimental value and I wasn't interested in upgrading it. That's consistent with witness statements. Several family members confirmed you showed no interest in selling. Ms. Hensley, given the value of the item in question, this is a serious case. Mr. Ashford is looking at felony fraud charges. The DA's office will likely pursue this aggressively. I understand. There is one other thing. Mr. Ashford mentioned debts, financial pressure. Sometimes in cases like this, if restitution is possible, if the defendant shows genuine remorse, we might see reduced charges. Is there anything you'd like to communicate through official channels? I thought about Victoria's voice on the phone. About Trevor's desperation. About my mother's plea for family harmony. No, I said finally. Let the DA do their job. The story hit the local news 3 days later. Man arrested for attempted theft of Imperial Russian artifact. They didn't use my name, but anyone who knew us would be able to connect the dots. My phone exploded with messages. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years. Distant relatives. Family friends. Everyone wanted to know about the ring, about Victoria, about Trevor, about how much it was really worth. I answered none of them. The Christie's appraisal happened on schedule. The specialist who examined the ring spent 3 hours with loupes and reference books and ultraviolet lights. When she finished, her hands were shaking. Miss Hensley, she said carefully, this is extraordinary. The provenance documentation is flawless. The gemological characteristics match historical records exactly. The Faberge hallmark is authentic. This is, without question, Grand Duchess Maria Pavlovna's Alexandrite. I've been working with Imperial Russian artifacts for 23 years, and I've never seen anything like this outside of a museum. What's it worth? She handed me a document. The official appraisal read, $12.4 million, with a notation that auction prices could potentially exceed $15 million depending on buyer interest. Will you sell? She asked quietly. I looked down at the ring on my finger, at the way it caught the light, at the history and weight and meaning it carried. No, I said. I don't think I will. James was waiting in the lobby. When I showed him the appraisal, he just shook his head. $12.4 million. You're wearing my entire retirement on your finger. Our retirement, I corrected. Margot, you know I love you, and I love that you want to keep your grandmother's ring, but sweetheart, that's $12 million. We could retire today. We could buy a house, travel the world, never worry about money again. Or, I said, I could keep wearing the ring my grandmother trusted me with, the one she wore for 30 years while everyone assumed it was worthless. I could honor her memory by doing exactly what she did, hiding something precious in plain sight. People will know now. After the news story, after Trevor's arrest, everyone knows what you're wearing. Do they? Or do they just know a story about a valuable ring? Stories fade. In 6 months, no one will remember the exact details. I'll just be the woman with the weird color-changing stone, wearing my grandmother's ring. He smiled. You're impossible. I learned from the best. Trevor pleaded guilty 3 months later. He got 18 months probation, 200 hours of community service, and a permanent fraud conviction on his record. Victoria filed for divorce 2 weeks after his sentencing. She called me once after that. I know you probably don't want to hear from me. Probably not, I agreed. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. Not just about Trevor and the ring. About everything. About Thanksgiving. About all the years of saying your life wasn't good enough, wasn't real enough. You were living quietly and successfully, and I was so busy performing my own success that I couldn't see yours. I know. Do you think? She hesitated. Do you think we'll ever be okay again? I thought about that. About family and forgiveness, about trust once broken and whether it could be rebuilt. Maybe, I said finally. But not today. Not for a while. I understand. I still wear the ring every day. Sometimes people ask about it, about the weird stone that changes color. I tell them it was my grandmother's, that it has sentimental value. Most people nod and move on. Some ask if it's real. I smile and change the subject. The truth is exactly where it's always been, hiding in plain sight, waiting for people to see past their assumptions. My grandmother taught me that the most valuable things are often the ones people overlook. She taught me that real wealth isn't about display, it's about knowing what you have and choosing carefully who you tell. She taught me that sometimes the best revenge is simply living well and letting other people reveal their own character. I think about her every time I look at my ring, every time it shifts from green to red in the changing light. She wore this for 30 years, and not one person ever guessed what it was. She must have smiled every time someone assumed it was costume jewelry, every time someone dismissed it as worthless. Now I understand why. There's a particular kind of power in being underestimated. In letting people make assumptions while you quietly possess something extraordinary. Victoria learned that lesson the hard way. Trevor learned it even harder. As for me, I'm still driving my 10-year-old Honda, still living in my one-bedroom apartment in Brookline, still working at my nonprofit. Still wearing my grandmother's ring. And every time someone assumes I can't afford better, I smile and think about the $12 million on my finger. Some things, I've learned, are worth more than money. But it never hurts to have both.